James Cartwright thinks it was inevitable he'd be killed off on Coronation Street. The 41-year-old actor's alter ego Theo Silverton was revealed on Friday, January 5, 26, to be the victim teased in a flash-forward back in February, and while the details of what exactly happened to him have not yet been explained, James was unsurprised to be told he'd be killed off following months of abuse from Theo towards his partner Todd Grimshaw, Gareth Pierce. James insisted it was better for viewers in the long term for Theo to meet a sticky end, rather than for the abuse to be played out again in a court case. Speaking on Inside Soap Scoop podcast, he said, "I join a long line of people who've met Corrie's own brand of justice. I think ultimately, it was always going to be thus. I remember chatting to Kate Brooks, the magnificent producer. Theo was all her doing, really. It was her vision and she's wonderful. When we very first started, she said, look, it's either going to be court or Corrie's own brand of justice. Then, as it went further on, it was decided that there's no need for another court case. So off he goes, mate. With domestic violence, and as gritty as it was, the feeling was, is there an appetite to relive it all when we've seen it? I think court cases are only good as a device if there's new evidence, a shocking witness, or somebody saw something. But actually it'd just be Todd saying what happened, Theo denying it and then reliving all of those awful events. It's been a brilliant storyline, but also it's been quite brutal, and whether there's an appetite to relive that when people, at home, are enjoying their corned beef hash, I don't know. The discovery of Theo's body will kickstart a murder mystery plot on Corrie, and while James admitted he knows who was responsible, he thinks his character made enough enemies to keep people guessing for some time. He said, I know exactly who's done it. He's basically upset everybody on the street. It could be Summer. I killed her dad, that's motivation. You've got George, because Todd's like a son to him. You've seen George punch me already. You've got Christina's a lunatic. It could be Todd, because he's just had enough. It could be Carl. There are many people it could be on that street, which I think is really exciting. Despite his on-screen death, James hinted fans haven't necessarily seen the last of him. Asked about the possibility of appearing in a flashback, he teased, I could not possibly say. I think we'll have to see what happened, right? How unsatisfactory if we don't. I think there will be some flashbacks and I think you will find out precisely what happened. But all part of the fun is the journey of that. There is so much more to come. Keep watching, it gets juicier and juicier. Theo's death will affect everybody in a different way. The rain had a way of making everything feel heavier in Weatherfield. It soaked into the cobbles, blurred the streetlights, and settled into people's bones like a quiet warning. Coronation Street had seen its share of storms, both the kind that fell from the sky and the kind that tore through lives, but this one felt different. James Cartwright stood beneath the faded awning outside the Rover's return, watching the rain gather in shallow puddles. He didn't move to go inside. Not yet. Inside meant questions, whispers, and the kind of silence that demanded answers no one wanted to give. He already knew what they'd say. It's tragic. No one saw it coming. How could this happen? James exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the cold air. They're wrong, he thought. This was always going to happen. Because to him, the signs had been there for weeks, maybe even months. Not obvious signs. Not the kind you'd notice unless you were looking closely. But James had always been good at noticing the things people tried hardest to hide. It started with the small moments. The hesitation before a smile. The way laughter didn't quite reach the eyes anymore. The silences that stretched just a little too long. People in Weatherfield were experts at pretending everything was fine, but cracks always showed if you knew where to look. And he had seen them. He remembered the last conversation. It replayed in his mind like a loop he couldn't switch off. You worry too much, James, they had said, brushing it off with a half-smile. Maybe, he replied, but I'd rather worry than ignore it. That was the thing about inevitability. It didn't arrive with a dramatic announcement. It crept in quietly, disguising itself as ordinary life until it was too late to stop it. A door creaked open behind him. The warm glow of the pub spilled out onto the wet pavement, along with the low murmur of voices. "You coming in or what?" James turned slightly. It was one of the regulars, their face pale and drawn. Everyone looked like that tonight, like the world had shifted just enough to leave them off balance. "In a minute," James said. The door lingered open for a second longer, then closed with a soft thud. The warmth vanished, replaced again by the cold, steady rhythm of rain. Inside, they were grieving. Outside, James was thinking. Not about what had happened, but why. Because deaths in Weatherfield were never just accidents. They were the culmination of choices, secrets, and moments people wished they could take back. This one was no different. He thought about the arguments that had gone too far. The words said in anger that couldn't be unsaid. The warnings ignored. The chances missed. It all stacked up, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left to go but down. "Inevitable," he muttered under his breath. The word sounded harsh, even to him. But it felt true. A figure approached through the rain, their footsteps splashing softly. They stopped a few feet away, studying him. "You don't seem surprised." James looked up. "Should I be?" "Someone's dead, James." "I know." "Then why are you standing out here like you expected it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced down the street, the familiar houses, the flickering lights, the place where everything had happened. It looked the same as it always did. That was the unsettling part. "Because," he said finally, "sometimes you can see where things are heading, even if no one else wants to admit it." The figure frowned. "That's a bit cold, don't you think?" "Maybe," James replied. "Or maybe it's honest." Silence settled between them, filled only by the sound of rain hitting the pavement. "Do you think it could have been stopped?" they asked. That question lingered longer than the others. It wasn't about shock or grief, it was about guilt. James considered it carefully. "Yes," he said at last. "But only if people had paid attention sooner." To what? To everything they chose to ignore. The figure looked away, as if those words had hit a little too close to home. "That's easy to say now," they muttered. "Is it?" James countered gently. "Or is it just easier than admitting we all saw something, and did nothing?" The truth had a way of making people uncomfortable. It stripped away the comfort of believing tragedy came out of nowhere. Because it rarely did. Another pause. Then, quietly. "You think we're all to blame?" James shook his head. "Not blame. Responsibility. There's a difference." He stepped forward, finally moving toward the pub door. His hand rested on the handle, but he didn't open it yet. "In Weatherfield," he continued, "everything's connected. One decision leads to another. One silence leads to something worse. You don't always see the outcome right away, but it's building, piece by piece. And this," the figure said, voice unsteady, "this was the result." James nodded. "I think it was always coming," he admitted. "Maybe not like this. Maybe not today. But eventually, yeah." The rain began to ease, softening into a light drizzle. The storm wasn't over, but it was changing. James pushed the door open. Inside, the room fell quiet for a moment as people turned to look at him. Grief hung heavy in the air, mixed with suspicion, fear, and something else, something unspoken. He stepped inside anyway. Because inevitability didn't mean indifference. It didn't mean the loss hurt any less. It just meant the story had been written long before anyone realized how it would end. And now, as the people of Coronation Street gathered to mourn, James Cartwright knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the moment everyone finally understood the consequences of everything that came before. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Crown ST.